Okay, so we can start. So thank you everyone for joining. Really excited to be here today to discuss kind of a very controversial topic in application security, DAST, API security testing, and everything between them. With me to lead the discussion. So we have the great Javan here.
Yes.
Yeah, will shortly introduce himself. So um, before I start, I just want to say to everyone, thank you for joining us, and please feel free. And I encourage you to be involved in the discussion. Send messages in the chat, send any questions, any comments, and yeah, let's roll. Okay, so maybe I'll start by shortly introducing our very special guest here,
Yeah.
Javan. Yeah, so Javan is one of the best experts in AppSec, we know today, and it's really a pleasure to have you with us. If you can, shortly introduce
No.
yourself.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to that you invited me to speak about Dust. I've been using Dust many years now, and I started as a developer, then used it also for my pen test engagement. Proxying the traffic, intercepting HTTP requests, and I've worked on projects to automate Dust into pipelines until now with API security. So I have some lessons learned, some best practice, some things that didn't work, and yeah, it's great to speak about API security and its impact on Dust especially.
Great, great. Maybe one sentence about yourself, Javan.
Yeah, sure. Totally forgot about that. I'm based in Germany. I work at Sage as a senior application security specialist, supporting our software teams in securing the software development lifecycle. Yeah, that's me.
Great, great. So, also, I'm going to shortly introduce myself. Tzvika Shneider, one of Pynt's founder and its CEO. Been doing R&D, cybersecurity engineering kind of since I remember myself. Um, Love music and love cybersecurity, and really, excited to talk about controversial topics such as we are today. So, let's start with the whole kind of creating a structure in the whole mess, right? So I just want to put it out there and would love, your perspective on everything, Joan. So in application security, the word divided for two things, two parts. One, static analysis. Second, dynamic analysis, right? In static analysis, we have SAST, we have ACA, we have IAC for configuration, and in dynamic analysis, we have Dust and we have others. API security testing, maybe some of them automated pen tests, etc. Whatever is not static is dynamic, and whatever is not dynamic, it's static in our case. But the thing is that around the dynamic today, there is a whole mess. Like, what should I have? What's the difference between Dust? How it's relate to API security testing? And this is why we're here. So we'll start, but putting the message here, and we'll say Dust and APIs don't collide. What do you think, Jevin?
Yeah. In the end, it's APIs for me is also just a dynamic environment which we scan using a dynamic tool, and yeah, um, and we have every application that we have nowadays is first API first. Basically, we have our API endpoints, and we build maybe a single page application around this using React and so on. So with APIs, we still need some way of dynamically scan those
Yeah,
APIs.
I agree. I think this is one of the and we'll also have to be a bit cynical and fun here in this webinar. I think it's one of the things that like we have too much definition with Gartner, so we have DAST, we have API security testing, whatever is like everything is been
Or attack surface scanning, all
yeah,
the
attack surfaces. So
everything is some kind of, but in the end, it's dynamic versus
yeah,
static.
But
Yeah.
I think still, when you look on categories like the category DAST and the category API security testing, so even Gartner come and state, the whole solution for DAST doesn't really work for API security testing, although, it should and might be called the DAST. So even, Gartner come and differentiate between two of those and say, hey, we have an upcoming, player here. So if you take it one step forward, dust has been always, not been always, maybe in the last couple of years, it's been perceived as something a bit, I would say, negative. Whether it's from the tech perspective or from security perspective, but really something that, like, what do you think about it, Javan? Like, as
Yeah.
expert and users of those platforms?
Yeah, definitely. DAST solutions really struggle with modern API architecture and APIs. And funnily, just yesterday, a colleague from mine, and also she's an AppSec specialist, she just said, DAST is totally useless, which is a very controversial topic, because it depends what you understand. What's a DAST
What's it?
solution? What's a DAST? Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. I think, like, the way I, perceived Dust a couple of years ago, and the way I think most people perceive Dust today is, it's kind of an old school, not modern, cannot really integrate with your development, pipeline, uh, um, a lot to configure, sometimes false positives, etc. But I think it's not because the dust tools were bad tools. I think they were very good, like the old traditional dust, right? They were very good to their time, right? When they got developed to the actual, I would say, development architecture that was more popular. So if you'll go, a bit with the details, so kind of trying to really come and list, the actual advantage of API security testing and how is that really, on top on traditional Dust. So maybe let's choose like one or two, lines and focus on them. So feel free.
But I remember the times where, I had to create I wanted to automate a DAST solution and run it against an endpoint or an application, and I wrote a 200 line script, starting to scan, putting it in active mode, then finally exporting the report, and then just to notice that my GitHub action stopped working because the time limit was reached after 1 hour. So, or another example was, where you configure everything, you automate your scan, and then you run the scan, and I only noticed after looking at the report that it was running without authentication, without any context. So it really, it does have some pain points. So I can understand why people really struggle with trusting the DAST solutions in general. Yeah.
By the way, people are in the chat. Not if you listen in it offline. If you're live right now, please, feel free to write in the chat. How do you perceive dust? How do you?
Yeah. Do you trust it? Do you think it's totally useless, like my colleague said?
So, I think on a very, let's start from a high level, to low level.
Yeah.
Traditional dust are being perceived as non-effective, or sometimes there is a lot of hate around it because, one, it's kind of very partial, right? It's limited more to the web part of the world, where we see, APIs in the last couple of years, started ruling the world. As you mentioned, Javan, API first. Obviously, now we have LLMs. I think not only that, a lot of the infrastructure, as we get in from, um, cloud providers, application frameworks, etc., kind of became, started to be very stable, and we see that most of the issues are around business logic and actual faults in the logic of the app and the way the applications work with each other. And this is why it's important to be very, very contextual. This is why Dust is being perceived, that it cannot really find those issues. And maybe the last point from my side, it's that Dust being perceived as something that runs hours to night, black box, and more of a fuzzing than, laser focused. So
Yeah, I can relate also to like the first point.
yeah,
10 years ago, we had .NET Razor pages, JSPs, we had dynamic content where those DAST solutions, they work because they were sniffing maybe form-based you had form-based authentication. You don't have this stuff anymore. It's a completely different architecture now. And if those, I would say, traditional tools, they are just built around that was the first thing they source form-based authentication and so on. And but now we have complete different architecture with like we have GraphQL, REST APIs, etc.
can you maybe have provide an example from your own world or day to day, or from the past? How do you see the actual difference, and where did you work in Dust and it didn't give solution, or the other way around?
Yeah. If I tried. Obviously, I've been continuing using the traditional DAST tools, both open source and commercial stuff that we know. And what I found is that, and I can understand my colleagues saying it's worthless or useless, the DAST tooling, saying that because the type of findings we are receiving is like HTTP headers, misconfigurations, the very low hanging fruit, but it doesn't go actually. The Dust is not actually able to go into understand our APIs, use them in a specific sequence like we want it to be used. It's missing this context. It's randomly sending those payloads, those fussing against those APIs. It doesn't care about context, sequence, and and what I want to say basically is it can't detect the more important vulnerabilities that we have. I don't care about misconfigured headers. It's something I can quickly check. I care most about IDOR vulnerabilities and so on. And
Yeah.
yes, that's a good comment. Dust is all about false positives. Someone mentioned in the chat, and remember from my own experience, for example, time-based SQL injection vulnerabilities. Those type of findings, you have them way too much, and mostly all of them are false positives. Yeah, things like that. It's just pain points, false positives.
I agree, and I think
Yeah.
most of the false positive, coming by when you do fuzzing and you're not doing contextual. But also, I think it's also related to the way organizations really wanted to adopt into integrate Dust. Back then, I think more the Dust was perceived of an external
Yeah.
tool, your own hands of the application security architecture, the application security engineer, and even sometimes running like as a SaaS Dust, right? From other cloud, etc. And a lot of application security people don't want to be attacked from another SaaS, from another, obviously, not their own environment. But not only that, I think it used to be more of a tool for the application security to understand whether if we have vulnerabilities after like a minute or 2 minutes before we deploy to production.
Yeah,
A
I
minute or
can understand this point because that's where I came from. Like as a security consultant, I was using Dust like over SEB or Burp, and those open source tooling to just help me to understand the application using it in the proxy mode, and then it was a manual activity at this time. Yeah, like I said.
But now I think the expectation of this kind of tool is to be really part of the development process. Like, even when we had Dust, we were waterfall. We weren't even agile
Yeah,
in
that's true.
development. And if we'll take it one step further, so why are people want to do dust earlier or security testing earlier? So it all comes, down to the actual shift left trend, right? You can say shift like that, shift left, or we can explain it a bit. So I think shift left in security is happening. It's happening slow, but it's happening. But there is no other way. Security will be completely shifted left as much as possible in terms of the application because of three things. One, there's a blur line between quality and security. And two, second thing is most of the issues can be only solved by code from the developers, right? They need to take ownership in that code. And third, the most important thing is money, right? In business, and this is where you lose money, right? When you finding problems later and you go back to the process, you need to go back to your developers and make
Yeah.
them understand what they did and how they should fix it now.
Yeah, I can't have my developers work for over an hour to finish the dust scan. That just doesn't work, and it's not shifting left, especially with our small release cycles.
By,
And
by,
then until the dust scan finish, you it's already um, too late. The context is lost for the developers. Like you said, you want to have that feedback
yeah,
immediately in the CI.
I
Yeah,
agree. By the way, just my 2 cents on shift left. When I said there's no other way, it's not like I'm trying to predict the actual future. I'm just looking on the data, and if we're looking in another, maybe two other parts of two other tech aspects or domains. Let's start with quality QA. 20 years ago, like 20 something years ago, there was a VP QA, VP quality, reporting to CEO, um, in parallel to the engineering. This doesn't exist anymore because a couple of years after we had from waterfall to agile and then QA in the R&D, outside R&D, kind of etc. But in some point of time, developers were measured right by quality, not monkey code, right? Not quantities, but quality. Does it run? Does it like definition of done, right? Same like similar, and it's completely shifted left
yeah,
from after to the developers. Same kind of with DevOps. Back then, 2010, 2009, when we invented the new animal. Um, DevOps, when IT administrator that didn't want to develop, didn't know how to develop, and developers that didn't know, for example, how to install a computer. So we invented, the DevOps. This is also shifted left as
yeah.
developers. They are doing a lot of DevOps, right? What do you see the future of security and application security?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more we can integrate with. Like now we have end-to-end tests, we have unit tests, so it's very easy to just use the existing, for example, Postman files and as input for our DAST or API security testing. So it's much more easier. Um, I was thinking about I don't want to be that hard on Dust too, because 10 years ago I was still using it. I was successful using it. I found cross-site scripting, I found SQL injection, I found all those type of vulnerabilities. But it's just now we have different environments. We have Postman collections which we can just integrate with. We have and we have different priorities, IDOR vulnerabilities, indirect or insecure direct object resource. No, you didn't need to help me defining IDOR, but I think Ovas just names this now broken access control, so it's just broken access.
Everything Ebola, yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I agree, with your point of view, but I think you said like I don't want to go too harsh, on dust, but I
yeah,
think you're not because everything is dust. The past is dust and the future is dust. It's just like this is the traditional dust, the old dust, and the future is dust because all of them are being done dynamically, right? Dynamic application security testing. I think but from analysts and vendors and companies kind of definitions will really narrow down that definition of dust to that old dust, right? So maybe let's take a look about how we look, on how application is being built, how we look in the world. So we think that maybe API security testing is the actual modern DAST and including everything, but we see also the future. So how do you, what's your point of view of that?
Yeah, I think this is a good diagram. Yeah, we have this extended functionalities. We have LLM APIs. We have chatbots integrated in our applications. So there's much more context to be aware of. The modern APIs as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, back then when we, legacy development was focused, I mean, when post after the internet, yeah, legacy development was based on web. The way our apps are building today are obviously web is a major part of it, but APIs is kind of, it's included in web. Web, it's the web, right? Internet. So how apps are built in today is really very kind of API focused or API first. Obviously, there are web working with APIs, there are mobile applications working with APIs, etc. And there are even like other applications that have no web and have no GUI and work with APIs. And we have even more. Let's take it to the next step, to the future, like on the LLM APIs, but not just LLM APIs, but in general, how the world will work. So let's say the only applications we have in life right now, all of them are agentic in some point of time, right? Agentic, everybody talks about it. But in the end, how the agentic will talk to the other agent or even to a website today?
It's again API.
Yeah, I think it will be APIs until we'll find more proprietary protocol or better solutions. So this is why APIs are there to be stay, and we need to treat them obviously like that. Any other comment on this from your side, Javan?
No, I agree.
Good. So from my perspective, all of those things are just terms, right? DAST, API security testing, LLM security testing. In the end, you need one platform, work fully automated, and serve obviously also the security people as well as the developers when it can happen, and one platform to rule all the application, which is in terms of our side of security, right? Like the old Google web, the modern web, APIs, and LLM. So it's not about moving from old Dust to API security testing or from other tools to other tools. It's moving from old Dust to new Dust because everything, as we mentioned, is a dust. What do you think?
Yeah, it's still dynamic. So
Yeah,
I got your point. It's just a matter of the term, of the definition. Yeah. So, and for me, the traditional DAST rules that we are scanning, they still exist in also in API security. We still scan for misconfigurations. We still scan for, for example, exposed.environment file. It's like this type of rules. It's API security can still be Dust. It's just a new Dust built around APIs first, and then
yeah,
traditional Dust rules that you scan for exposed other folders and so on.
yeah.
Mhm.
I agree, and if we look in the actual details, so we can see that we've been to a dramatic era, web out and APIs in, but I think it's really emphasized the point that everything today, until we'll have something new for agentic API, everything is kind of
Yeah.
API based and API first today. Also, the second point is that we really need advanced context awareness. In a world where sometimes static analysis and SAST are becoming weaker, and because they don't have the context, and then they become smaller because they are not big monolith, that at least you can get
Yeah.
some context. So if I can, at least, I'm praised for dust. I think using solely only, without context today, whether if it's static or dynamic without context, is like, taking your modern electric car to a repair shop today and trying to find the problem and fix it without turning on the car. This is kind of doing some static analysis and also for that same analogy, but doing like the traditional DAST, is actually, going and trying just turn on the car and fix the problem without actually, reproducing the issue. So I think that we get to a point we really kind of understand. It's a lot of terminology. I think the industry understand it, and the industry also is really going to direction that they want consolidation and one platform and not five different tools to test application
Yeah.
security.
And I think that's also confusion for our application security team. Like,
Yeah.
do we now we have API security? Do we still need Dust, or do we have Dust? Do we need API security? It's this
Yeah,
questions that we have. Yeah.
so I think it's kind of the same play we have with WAF, Web Application Firewall, and some of the API threat protection, right? We
Oh,
can
yes.
we see this is also consolidating, so I
It's
think
just
that
the next evolution of the Dust, basically, for me personally. Yeah.
yeah, and the next evolution is not really related to the actual tech we do with security. It's related to the actual development tech, and the security need to keep the pace. So this is what's happening here. So to summarize, just for us, making sure you get the point. Everything you do dynamically, it's dust, and we just need to choose the right dust that is advanced, modern, and really one-stop shop for dynamic security. Okay, so any closing words, Javan?
No,
Summarize.
that was a fun session, but I managed to say my pain points, so that's good. No, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so it was a pleasure having you. Enjoyed that chat. Obviously, we talked before. We'll talk after.
Yeah.
Really, really enjoyed our chat, and I think it was
And
very informative.
and my colleague joined also this webinar, so we will see how her opinion changed about
Yeah,
Dust is useless. It's now
yeah.
just the next evolution.
Depends which one. Yeah. So, Javan, really appreciate your time. It was very valuable. Thank you. Would love to, have you again always. If you guys have any like folks on the chat, if you have any question, feel free to do it now. And if not, feel free just to reach out directly to myself or either Javan. Okay, so there is one question from the audience, and I'll let you take it. What about moving to Yast instead of Dust? IAST or Yast, it depends how you
Yes.
say it. Yeah.
Do you mean? Should I answer, take this one?
Yeah, if you want, I'll take it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. IAST is a mix of both of SAST and DAST, so it does have more context than just DAST, and I think it also works well with some application frameworks. But then with IAST, you have again, if you deploy your React front end somewhere, you miss some context. Yeah, maybe Tzvika, you have
Yeah,
more
I
on
think
the.
I think I asked. Yeah, I think I asked is a bit. We'll say like dying, but the IAST is a bit like an old fashioned. It was very good to its time because it really connected the dot between like you don't have technology to do very context, but then you have a way to do that. But I think the main problem for this is obviously you need a developer to actually inject code.
Oh
And
yes, that was always an issue, and always in Blocker. You have to actually get the agent working and simulate some traffic on it.
yeah,
Um,
it's very intrusive, not just to the developer, to the code, but also to the
yeah,
development process. So I think
yeah.
this is why
I
it's
think the technology is also currently shifting away from EAS to ADR or RASP. There's another new acronym out there. ADR is the new RASP, and EAS is going to be ADR, and I think it's just another
I think
category now. Yeah.
one of the problem in general in AppSec, if developers will deeply care about security, everything almost solves, right? Like if but it's not that it's not that way. And I think IaaS is really not fixing the gap between security and development. It's like increasing the gap. You ask them to integrate code and then to integrate agents, and the ultimate dust will just maybe use the data from the developers in order to enhance its test and provide them a solution, but doesn't require them to do work,
Mhm.
be affected. So I think this is why we see a lot of moving from YAST either to the DAST or to RASP, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
A lot of
but
acronyms.
Rasp is also dead. The Rasp is dead.
Yeah,
But it's been a while since I saw an EAS solution in action. Yeah, so can't comment to it that much. Yeah.
yeah. I know. To be honest, I know a few like good ones, but I think they're like maybe outdated to the current development. Um, Avusan, I hope it answered your question. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, so I think it's a wrap. Javan, thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate.
thank you so much.
Hope to have you again if you allow us. And everyone, thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. Feel free to reach out for any question or comment. And if you like, to take a ride on some modern dust, so feel free, just to, visit our site or just um, scan this code. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Javan.
Thank you. Bye.